My daughter-in-law sold my jewelry, every single piece that my Harold had given me over 53 years of marriage, and when I found out what she'd done, I picked up the phone and reported every last item as stolen. But let me back up, because this story, this betrayal, it didn't happen overnight. No, this was months in the making, and when I finally discovered the truth, well, let's just say I made sure justice was served cold as ice. You know what hurts more than losing your most precious possessions? It's losing them to someone you trusted, someone you welcomed into your family with open arms, someone you thought would carry on the legacy of love that those pieces represented, someone who sat at your dinner table, smiled to your face, called you mom, and then went upstairs and robbed you blind while you were serving dessert. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Hi, my name is Dorothy Mae Richardson, though everyone's called me Dot since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I'm 80 years old, and I live in a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in Cedar Falls, Iowa, the same house where Harold and I raised our 2 boys, Michael and Stephen. It's got white siding that needs painting, a front porch with a swing that creaks just right, and a backyard with 2 oak trees that Harold and I planted the year we moved in, back in 1968. Those trees are taller than the house now, and every fall, when the leaves turn gold and red, I sit on that porch and remember the young couple we were, dirt under our fingernails, dreaming about the life we'd build together. I worked as a registered nurse at Mercy Hospital for 37 years before I retired back in 2001, started on the night shift in the emergency room when I was just 23 years old, fresh out of nursing school with starched white uniforms and shoes that pinched my feet something awful. Worked my way up to head nurse in the cardiac unit. Saw medicine change from handwritten charts and glass thermometers to computers and digital everything. Those were good years, hard years, long shifts and tired feet, holidays missed and birthdays celebrated late. But good years nonetheless. I loved my patients, loved the work, loved knowing I was helping people on the worst days of their lives. Harold was a mechanical engineer at John Deere, started there right out of college, and stayed for 42 years until he retired in 2007. He was the kind of man who could fix anything, build anything, explain how anything worked with patience and clarity. Our garage was always full of projects, half-built bookshelves and repaired lawnmowers and mysterious contraptions that he swore would make our lives easier. Most of them actually did. He built the deck in our backyard, installed all the ceiling fans in the house, rebuilt the engine in our old Chevy truck twice, and never once complained about being asked to fix one more thing. Together, we built a life that wasn't fancy, but was filled with love, respect, and the kind of quiet happiness that comes from truly knowing another person. We had our fights, of course. 53 years of marriage isn't all sunshine and roses. Harold had a stubborn streak a mile wide, and I could hold a grudge like nobody's business when I put my mind to it. But we learned to compromise, to say we're sorry, to choose each other over being right. That's the secret, really. Choosing each other, day after day, year after year, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. We didn't have much money when we first got married back in 1965. Harold was making barely enough to cover rent and groceries, and I was still in nursing school, working part-time at a diner to help make ends meet. Our first apartment was above Miller's hardware store on Main Street, 2 rooms and a bathroom with pipes that clanged all night long. We had a hot plate for cooking, a card table for eating, and a mattress on the floor that we'd bought at a yard sale for $15. We were 22 years old, completely broke and absolutely happy. But Harold, bless his soul, he had a tradition that started that very first year and continued until the day he died. Every birthday, every anniversary, every Christmas, he would save up and buy me a piece of jewelry. Nothing extravagant, mind you. We're talking about a factory engineer's salary and a nurse's wages in the 60s and 70s. We had a mortgage, car payments, 2 growing boys who needed shoes and school supplies and money for Little League. But Harold would squirrel away a little bit each month, $5 here, $10 there, saving up in a coffee can. He kept hidden in the back of his sock drawer. Each piece was carefully chosen, wrapped up in a story of our lives together, a tangible reminder of a moment in time. He'd spend weeks researching, visiting jewelry stores on his lunch breaks, talking to jewelers about quality and value and what would last forever. Because that's what he wanted, he told me once. He wanted to give me things that would last forever, just like his love for me. The first piece was a simple gold bracelet he gave me on our first anniversary. We were still living in that tiny apartment above the hardware store, still eating more ramen noodles and canned soup than was probably healthy, still saving every penny for the house we dreamed of buying someday. I remember that day so clearly. Harold had told me we couldn't afford to go out to dinner, that we'd have to celebrate at home. I said that was fine, that being together was all that mattered, and I meant it. I made spaghetti with sauce from a jar, and we ate it by candlelight at our card table, and I thought that was our celebration. Then he pulled out a little velvet box from his jacket pocket, and my heart just about stopped. I knew we didn't have money for jewelry. I knew we were saving for a house. I opened that box, and there was this delicate gold bracelet, simple and beautiful, and I started crying. Not happy tears at first. I was crying because I knew we needed that money for so many other things. For the deposit on a house, for Harold's work boots that had holes in the soles, for the dentist appointment I'd been putting off because we couldn't afford it. But Harold just took the bracelet out of the box and fastened it around my wrist, and he kissed my forehead, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Dot, every year, I want to give you something that shows you I'd choose you all over again. We'll have lean years and we'll have better years, but every year I want you to have proof that you're my priority, that you're my treasure, that I choose you over anything else in this world." And he did. For 53 years until the day he passed away in 2018, that man never missed a single occasion. Not one birthday, not one anniversary, not one Christmas. Even during the really hard years, when Stephen needed braces and Michael broke his arm and the furnace died all in the same month, even then Harold found a way. There was the pearl necklace from our 10th anniversary, bought after months of saving, presented to me in a restaurant that we could barely afford, but Harold insisted on because 10 years deserves something special. I wore my nicest dress, the blue one I'd made myself, and Harold wore the suit he'd gotten married in, let out a bit because we'd both gotten a little rounder with happiness and home cooking. The pearls were cream-colored and lustrous, and when he clasped them around my neck, he whispered, "Every pearl represents a year with you, Dot, and they're all precious." The sapphire earrings came when Michael was born, deep blue stones set in white gold. Harold gave them to me in the hospital, 2 days after our first son came into the world, tiny and perfect and terrifying in his fragility. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, scared I wouldn't know how to be a good mother, and Harold sat beside my hospital bed and told me I was already the best mother in the world. The sapphires matched Michael's newborn eyes, that dark blue that all babies have, and Harold said, "Every time you wear these, remember this moment. Remember how much love we have for this little boy. Remember how our family just got bigger and better." The ruby ring came when Stephen graduated college, the first person in either of our families to get a degree. We were so proud we could have burst. Harold had wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it, had gone straight to work to support his mother after his father died. I'd done my nursing training, but always wondered what a full university experience would have been like. Watching Stephen walk across that stage in his cap and gown, knowing he'd done something we'd never had the chance to do, it was overwhelming. The ruby was deep red, like a drop of wine, and Harold said it represented passion, the passion for learning that Stephen had shown, the passion for family that had driven us to give our boys opportunities we'd never had. The emerald pendant came from our trip to Ireland, the one big vacation we took in 40 years of marriage. We saved for 5 years for that trip, putting away money in a special account marked Ireland Fund, adding to it whenever we could. It was 1998, we were both in our 50s. The boys were grown and on their own, and we finally had a little breathing room financially. We spent 2 weeks driving around the Irish countryside, staying in bed and breakfasts, visiting ancient castles, drinking Guinness in pubs where the locals taught us folk songs and told us stories. In a little jewelry shop in Galway, Harold bought me an emerald pendant, green as the Irish hills, and he put it around my neck and said, "This reminds me of Ireland, but more than that, it reminds me that we made it, Dot. We built a good life. We raised good sons. We're happy, we did it." The diamond bracelet came on our 50th anniversary, the one piece that cost more than all the others combined, bought after a lifetime of saving and planning. By then, Harold was retired. I was retired, and we finally had a little money in the bank. The boys threw us a party at the Elks Lodge. 50 people crammed into the banquet room, eating cake and dancing to music from the 60s, celebrating 5 decades of marriage. Harold gave me the bracelet in front of everyone, and his hand shook as he fastened it around my wrist. The diamonds caught the light and sparkled like stars, and Harold's eyes filled with tears as he said, 50 years, 50 years, and I love you more today than I did the day we got married. You're still my best friend. You're still the first person I want to talk to when I wake up and the last person I want to see before I go to sleep. You're still my favorite person in the whole world. After Harold passed away in 2018, those pieces weren't just jewelry to me. They were him. They were us. They were every laugh, every struggle, every triumph, every quiet evening on the porch watching the sun go down, every dance in the kitchen while dinner cooked on the stove, every whispered, I love you in the dark, every time he reached for my hand without thinking, every time I caught him looking at me with that soft smile that said more than words ever could. Those pieces were our story, written in gold and precious stones, proof that we had loved each other deeply and well for over half a century. I kept them all in an antique mahogany jewelry box that had belonged to Harold's grandmother, passed down through the family and given to me on our wedding day. It was beautiful, with carved flowers on the lid and a red velvet lining inside, and a small key that locked it safely. That box sat on my dresser, in the same spot for 50 years, and sometimes, on the hard days when I missed Harold so much I could barely breathe, when the house felt too empty and too quiet, when I'd reach for the phone to call him before remembering he was gone, I'd open that box and touch each piece, remember each story, let myself cry, and somehow feel close to him again. Now my son Michael, he married a woman named Vanessa about 6 years ago. She was his second wife. His first marriage, to a sweet woman named Jennifer, had ended amicably enough after about 8 years. No children, no drama, just two people who grew apart and had the maturity to admit it wasn't working. Jennifer and Michael stayed friends, actually. She sends Christmas cards every year, remarried, a few years after their divorce to a man who seems to make her very happy. Sometimes life just doesn't work out the way you plan, and that's okay. Michael met Vanessa at some kind of professional networking event. He was in sales for a medical supply company, doing well for himself, living in a nice condo, financially stable, emotionally ready to try again. When he first told me he'd met someone, I was happy for him. He deserved love, deserved partnership, deserved someone to share his life with. When he introduced me to Vanessa, I wanted to like her. I really did. I'm not one of those mothers who thinks no woman is good enough for her son. Jennifer had been wonderful, and I genuinely mourned when their marriage ended. Not because I blamed anyone, just because I'd loved having her in the family. So I came to that first meeting with an open heart and high hopes. Vanessa was 15 years younger than Michael, which didn't bother me in itself. Age is just a number, and I've known plenty of couples with age gaps who were perfectly happy. She was beautiful in that high-maintenance sort of way, always perfectly dressed in clothes that looked expensive, always perfectly made up with the kind of makeup that takes an hour to apply but is supposed to look natural. Nails always done in elaborate designs that must have cost a fortune to maintain. Her hair was highlighted blonde, professionally styled, never a strand out of place. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine, polished and perfect and completely out of place in my modest living room with its comfortable old furniture and family photos on every surface. She worked in marketing, or at least that's what she said. Though in all the years she was part of our family, I never quite understood what her job actually entailed. Whenever I'd ask about her work, trying to make conversation, trying to show interest, she'd give vague answers about brand management and social media strategy and consulting, but never anything concrete. I never saw her stressed about work. Never heard her mention a boss or a difficult project or a deadline. Michael said she worked from home most of the time, freelancing for various clients, which seemed to mean she made her own hours and answered to no one. From the very beginning, there were little things that bothered me, little red flags that I told myself I was imagining, that I was being an overprotective mother, that I was looking for problems that weren't really there. The way she looked around my house with this barely concealed disdain, her eyes traveling over my furniture, my decorations, my lifetime of accumulated memories, with an expression that said how quaint in the most condescending way possible. The way she'd make comments about how vintage everything was, and not in a complimentary way. "Oh, is this furniture original to the house?" she'd ask, her tone dripping, with false sweetness that didn't hide the underlying criticism. How nostalgic. She never asked about Harold, never seemed interested in family stories or history. When I'd mention him in conversation, she'd get this glazed look in her eyes, like she was waiting for me to stop talking so she could change the subject to something more interesting. At Sunday dinners, she'd sit at the table that Harold built, eating off plates that Harold and I had received as wedding gifts. In the house that Harold and I had made into a home, and she couldn't be bothered to show even polite interest in the man who'd made it all possible. She never offered to help with anything. At family gatherings, I'd be in the kitchen cooking, serving, cleaning up, and Vanessa would sit in the living room, scrolling through her phone, occasionally wandering in to pick at the food before it was ready, making comments about calories and carbs and how she really shouldn't, but then eating anyway and making a big production about how she'd have to do extra time at the gym tomorrow. She never asked if she could help set the table, never offered to bring a dish, never stayed after dinner to help clean up. She'd just sit there, perfectly manicured hands on her phone, while Michael and I did all the work. But Michael loved her, or thought he did, and I told myself I was being an overprotective mother, seeing problems where there weren't any. Maybe she was just shy, I told myself. Maybe she came from a different kind of family, where people didn't pitch in the way we did. Maybe her way of showing love was different from mine. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, tried to welcome her, tried to make her feel like family. They got married in this elaborate ceremony that cost more than Harold and I had spent on our entire first year of marriage, maybe our first 5 years. Vanessa insisted on everything being perfect, which apparently meant expensive. The wedding was at some fancy country club with a guest list of 200 people, most of whom I'd never met. The flowers alone cost thousands of dollars. Huge arrangements of roses and orchids and flowers I couldn't even name, decorating every surface. The food was fancy, tiny portions of things with French names, served by waiters in tuxedos. The dress Vanessa wore probably cost as much as a used car. All lace and beading and a train so long it needed 3 bridesmaids to carry it. Michael took out a loan to pay for it, which worried me sick. I offered to help, pulled out some of the savings Harold and I had put away, but Vanessa turned it down with this tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh no, Dot, we couldn't possibly take your money," she said, but her tone made it clear she thought the amount I was offering wasn't worth mentioning, wasn't enough to make a dent in her grand plans. So Michael borrowed, signed papers for a loan that would take years to pay off, all for one day, one party, one elaborate show that seemed more about impressing people than celebrating love. I thought about my wedding, Harold and me at the courthouse with our parents and 2 friends as witnesses, followed by pie at the diner where I worked. My dress had cost $35 on sale. Our rings were simple gold bands that Harold bought with money he'd saved from his first paycheck. The whole day probably cost less than Vanessa's bouquet. But we'd been just as married, just as committed, just as in love as any couple with a country club wedding and a guest list of 200. After the wedding, things were cordial between Vanessa and me. We weren't close, but we weren't hostile either. She'd come to Sunday dinners with Michael, though she usually spent most of the time on her phone, texting or scrolling through social media, occasionally showing Michael something on the screen and laughing at some joke I wasn't part of. She never brought anything to dinner, never offered to help clean up, never seemed particularly interested in being part of the family. But she was polite enough, said thank you for dinner before they left, complimented the food in a way that sounded automatic and insincere, and I accepted that this was just who she was. Michael seemed happy enough, which was all that mattered to me. He'd talk about trips they were planning, restaurants they'd tried, shows they'd seen. Their life sounded exciting, glamorous even, certainly different from the quiet, simple life Harold and I had built. I told myself that different wasn't bad, that every couple finds their own way, that my job was to support Michael's choices, not judge them. Then, about 2 years ago, I had a health scare that changed everything. I was at the grocery store, doing my weekly shopping on a Tuesday morning, like I always did, comparing prices on canned tomatoes and trying to remember if I needed more flour, when suddenly the floor seemed to tilt and the lights got very bright and very far away. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground, looking up at fluorescent lights and worried faces, hearing someone say call an ambulance in a voice that seemed to come from very far away. They rushed me to Mercy Hospital, the same hospital where I'd worked for 37 years, where I'd cared for countless patients and now found myself on the other side of that experience, Turns out it was severe dehydration combined with a medication interaction. My blood pressure medication and a new arthritis prescription weren't playing nice together, and I hadn't been drinking enough water during a particularly hot week. Nothing life-threatening, the doctor assured me, but serious enough to warrant overnight observation and a stern lecture about staying hydrated and checking with my doctor before starting any new medications. But it scared me. It scared me badly. I'd been so independent, so capable, living alone in my house since Harold died, managing everything myself. Grocery shopping and yard work and bill paying, keeping up with doctor's appointments and medications and home maintenance. Suddenly, lying in that hospital bed with an IV in my arm and monitors beeping around me, I felt old in a way I hadn't before. I felt vulnerable. I felt scared. It scared Michael too. He came to the hospital within an hour of getting the call, rushed in looking pale and panicked, and I saw him age 10 years in that moment when he saw me lying in that hospital bed. His father had died suddenly, a heart attack while mowing the lawn, gone before the ambulance even arrived, and I knew Michael lived with the fear of losing me the same way, without warning, without a chance to say goodbye. After I got home from the hospital, Michael sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten thousands of meals, where he'd done his homework as a boy, where Harold and I had paid bills and planned our lives and played cards on rainy evenings. He held my hands and said, "Mom, you can't live alone anymore. What if something serious happens and no one's here? What if you fall and can't get to the phone? What if you have another episode like this and there's no one around to call for help?" I argued with him. Lord, how I argued. I loved my independence, loved my home, loved my routines, loved being in charge of my own life. The thought of leaving my house, the house Harold and I had bought and made into a home, the house where I'd raised my boys, the house filled with 50 years of memories, it broke my heart. I wasn't ready for assisted living or a nursing home or whatever Michael was suggesting. I was still capable, still sharp, still able to take care of myself. One health scare didn't mean I was incompetent. We went back and forth for weeks. Michael wanted me to move in with him and Vanessa, which I absolutely refused. I could just imagine being a burden in their home, in the way, cramping their style, feeling like a guest in someone else's space. Stephen, my younger son who lived in California with his wife and 3 kids, called and offered to pay for a full-time caregiver, which I also refused. I didn't need someone hovering over me, watching my every move, treating me like an invalid. Finally, we compromised. I would stay in my home, keep my independence, keep my life, but I would give Michael and Vanessa a key to the house, just in case of emergencies. They'd check on me regularly. Michael stopping by a few times a week, Vanessa, who supposedly worked from home most days, popping by to make sure I was okay. I'd get one of those medical alert necklaces, the kind where you press a button if you fall or need help. I'd check in with Michael every day, either by phone or text, just a quick message to let him know I was fine. And I'd be more careful about my health, stay on top of my medications, drink more water, see my doctor regularly. It seemed like a reasonable compromise, a way to give Michael peace of mind while preserving my independence. And at first, it worked fine. At first, Vanessa's visits were brief and perfunctory. She'd stick her head in the door, call out just checking on you, wait for me to respond, and leave. 5 minutes, in and out, barely time to take off her coat. She was fulfilling her obligation to Michael, doing what she'd agreed to do, nothing more. But then gradually, things started to change. Vanessa started staying longer, started coming into the house instead of just calling from the doorway. She'd make comments about the house, about how much work it must be for me to maintain at my age. "This is such a big house for just one person. Don't you get lonely here by yourself? Doesn't all the upkeep get exhausting?" She'd run her finger along a windowsill, checking for dust, or point out a spot on the ceiling where the paint was cracking, or mention how outdated the kitchen was, how much easier my life would be with a modern kitchen, updated appliances, new countertops. She started suggesting that maybe I should think about downsizing, moving into a senior living community. She brought brochures, glossy pamphlets with pictures of smiling elderly people, playing cards and doing yoga and eating meals in cheerful dining rooms. "Think of how much easier your life would be, she'd say with this saccharine smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No yard work, no maintenance, no worrying about the house. Someone else handles all of that. And you'd have people your own age to socialize with. Activities planned every day, never a lonely moment." I told her repeatedly I wasn't interested. This was my home. Harold and I bought it in 1968, a young couple with 2 toddlers and dreams bigger than our bank account. We painted every room together. Harold on the ladder reaching the high spots, me cutting in the edges with careful precision. We planted every tree in the yard, Harold digging the holes while I held the saplings steady, both of us imagining how big they'd grow, how someday they'd provide shade for grandchildren we hoped to have. We built the deck out back, Harold measuring and sawing and hammering while I handed him tools and brought him lemonade, the boys playing in the yard, the dog barking at squirrels, the radio playing country music. This house held 60 years of memories. The scratches on the kitchen door frame marked my boys' growth, measured every birthday, showing how they shot up from toddlers to teenagers taller than me. The dent in the living room wall was from when Michael learned to ride a bike, indoors on a rainy day and lost control. The slightly crooked cabinet door in the bathroom was Harold's handiwork, from when he tried to fix it himself and got the hinge not quite right, and I'd never let him fix it properly because I liked having that reminder of his stubbornness and imperfection. I could walk through this house with my eyes closed and know exactly where I was, by the creaks in the floor, the way the light came through the windows, the particular smell of each room. The house smelled like Harold's coffee in the morning, like the lavender potpourri I kept in bowls, like the lemon polish I used on the furniture, like home. I wasn't leaving this house unless they carried me out in a coffin, and I told Vanessa that in no uncertain terms. But Vanessa was persistent. She kept bringing brochures, kept talking about how much my house was worth in the current market, kept mentioning how I could sell it and live comfortably somewhere else, have money left over to travel or spoil my grandchildren or whatever I wanted. She started dropping comments about specific senior communities, how nice they were, how she'd driven by and they looked lovely, how they had waiting lists so I should really get my name on the list now, just in case I decided I was interested later. I started to realize that her concern wasn't really about my well-being. There was something else going on, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. She had her eye on something, though I couldn't figure out exactly what. Was it the house? Did she want Michael and me to sell so they could buy something bigger? Was it money? Did they need money for something and she thought selling my house was the solution? I didn't know, but I didn't like it. I started feeling uncomfortable in my own home when she was around, like she was sizing everything up, calculating values, making plans I wasn't part of. But I didn't say anything to Michael. She was his wife, and I didn't want to cause problems between them based on a feeling, a suspicion, nothing concrete. Then about 8 months ago, I started noticing things going missing. Small things at first, things I might not notice right away. A silver picture frame that usually sat on the mantel, the one that held a photo of Harold and me on our 25th anniversary, gone. I searched everywhere, thought maybe I'd moved it while dusting, forgot where I'd put it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. An antique clock that Harold's father had given us as a wedding present, a beautiful brass piece that sat on the bookshelf, gone. I was sure I'd seen it just a week ago, but now the shelf was empty, just a dust-free spot where the clock had been. A set of crystal candlesticks that had belonged to my mother, gone. A vintage brooch I'd inherited from Harold's grandmother, gone. A set of gold-rimmed china plates that I kept in the dining room cabinet, gone. At first I thought I was losing my mind. I thought maybe I was getting forgetful, moving things and not remembering. At 80, your memory isn't what it used to be, and I worried I was experiencing the beginning of dementia or Alzheimer's. I'd watched my own mother go through that, watched her forget names and faces and eventually not even recognize me, and I was terrified it was happening to me. I started keeping lists, writing down where I put things, checking and rechecking, trying to keep track. But things kept disappearing. I'd write down, silver frame on mantle, and then 2 weeks later, go to check and it would be gone. And I'd think, did I move it? Did I write down the wrong location? Am I losing my grip on reality? It was a terrible feeling, that creeping doubt in your own mind. I started questioning everything, second-guessing every memory, wondering if I could trust myself. And I didn't tell anyone, not Michael, not my doctor, not even Stephen when he called from California. I was ashamed, scared, convinced I was slipping away the same way my mother had. Meanwhile, Vanessa's visits became more frequent. She started coming 3, 4, 5 times a week, always when Michael was at work. She'd bring me lunch, which was thoughtful, I supposed, though I'd been feeding myself for 80 years and didn't really need help. She'd offer to help clean, to organize, to freshen things up a bit. And she was always so insistent that I rest, that I let her take care of things. You just relax, Dot. Put your feet up. Watch your shows. I'll tidy up. She'd shoo me into the living room or suggest I take a nap. And like a fool, I trusted her. She was my daughter-in-law, Michael's wife, family. Why wouldn't I trust her? Looking back now, I can see the pattern so clearly it makes me sick. She was mapping out my house, figuring out what was valuable, what could be sold easily, what I might not notice missing right away. She'd ask questions that seemed like innocent conversation. Oh, is this real silver? It's beautiful. Where did you get it? These plates are gorgeous. Are they antique? Are they worth much? This jewelry box is exquisite. Is it valuable? I answered her questions, happy that she seemed interested, happy that she was finally asking about family history, about the stories behind the objects in my home. I told her about Harold's grandmother's jewelry box, about my mother's china, about the silver we'd received as wedding gifts. I told her everything, gave her a complete inventory without even realizing what I was doing. She was playing me, playing a long game, gaining my trust, getting information, all while stealing from me little by little. And I was so desperate for a connection with her, so happy that she seemed to finally be making an effort to be part of the family, that I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. On Sunday in late October, Michael and Vanessa came for dinner like they did most Sundays. I'd made pot roast, Harold's favorite, cooked low and slow all afternoon until the meat was falling apart, and the vegetables were soft and the gravy was rich and thick. I'd made mashed potatoes from scratch, real ones, not the instant kind, whipped with butter and cream until they were fluffy and perfect. I'd made green beans with bacon the way Harold's mother used to make them. I'd baked an apple pie for dessert, using apples from the tree in my backyard, the tree Harold and I had planted 30 years ago. We ate dinner at the dining room table, the three of us, and it was almost like old times. Michael was in a good mood, telling funny stories about his co-workers, laughing at my jokes, helping himself to seconds and thirds like he used to do as a teenager. Even Vanessa seemed more relaxed than usual, less glued to her phone, actually participating in the conversation. After we ate, after I'd served the pie with vanilla ice cream, after Michael had complimented the meal at least 5 times, Vanessa excused herself to use the bathroom. She asked which one she should use, and I said the upstairs bathroom was closer, the one near my bedroom, rather than the powder room on the main floor. She thanked me and headed upstairs. She was gone for quite a while, 15, maybe 20 minutes. I remember because Michael and I had finished our pie and I was starting to clear the table when she finally came back down. When she appeared, she looked flushed, excited almost, her eyes too bright, her movements a little too quick. But she covered it quickly with a complaint about not feeling well, said she thought maybe the richness of the meal had upset her stomach. Could they leave a little earlier than usual? Michael was all concern, helped her to the car, came back to give me a quick hug and thank me for dinner. They left, and I waved from the porch as they drove away, thinking it was a successful evening, thinking maybe Vanessa and I were finally starting to connect. That night, I went upstairs to get ready for bed, my usual routine. I washed my face, brushed my teeth, put on my nightgown, took my evening medications, and then something made me check my jewelry box. I can't explain it, just a feeling, an instinct. A whisper in my mind that said, look, check, make sure. I walked to my dresser, my heart starting to beat faster for no reason I could name. I picked up Harold's grandmother's mahogany jewelry box, the one that had sat in that exact spot for 50 years. I put my hand on the carved lid, felt the smooth wood under my fingers, and opened it. Empty, completely empty. Every single piece was gone. The gold bracelet from our first anniversary, the pearl necklace from our 10th, the sapphire earrings from when Michael was born, the ruby ring from Stephen's graduation, the emerald pendant from Ireland, the diamond bracelet from our 50th anniversary, everything gone. 53 years of love, of memories, of Harold stolen. I stood there, frozen, the empty box in my hands, unable to process what I was seeing. My brain couldn't make sense of it. The pieces had been there. I'd opened the box just a few days ago. Touched the diamond bracelet, remembered Harold's hands shaking as he fastened it around my wrist. Remembered the tears in his eyes as he told me he loved me. The jewelry had been there, and now it was gone. I started shaking, my whole body trembling like I was standing in a blizzard. My hands shook so badly I had to set the jewelry box down before I dropped it. I couldn't breathe right, my breath coming in short gasps that didn't seem to bring any air. I felt dizzy, disoriented, like the room was tilting and spinning around me. At first, I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it. I searched the entire bedroom, pulling open drawers, looking in the closet, checking under the bed, thinking maybe I'd moved the jewelry for some reason. Maybe I'd put it somewhere safe and forgotten. But I knew, deep in my heart, beneath the panic and the denial, I knew exactly what had happened. Vanessa had been upstairs, alone, in my bedroom, near my jewelry box for 20 minutes. Vanessa, who'd been asking questions about my valuables, who'd been pushing me to move, who'd been in my house constantly, who'd been alone with my things dozens of times. Vanessa, who'd looked flushed and excited when she came back downstairs, who'd suddenly felt sick and needed to leave quickly. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in Harold's recliner, the old worn lazy boy that I'd kept even, though it was ratty and out of style because it still smelled like him, because I could sit in it and feel surrounded by him. I sat there all night, wrapped in the afghan his mother had crocheted, and I cried. I cried for the loss, for the empty jewelry box, for the pieces I'd never see again. I cried for each memory attached to each piece, for our first anniversary and Michael's birth and Stephen's graduation, and our trip to Ireland and our 50th anniversary. I cried for Harold, for the love and thought and sacrifice he'd put into each gift. I cried for the betrayal, for the fact that someone I'd welcomed into my family, someone I'd tried so hard to connect with, someone I'd trusted in my home, had violated that trust in the worst possible way. But as the night wore on, as the tears finally stopped and the sun started to rise outside the window, something else grew inside me alongside the grief. Anger. A cold, burning anger that filled my chest and spread through my whole body, making my hands clench and my jaw tight. How dare she? How dare she come into my home, eat my food, accept my hospitality, my trust, my attempts at connection, and steal from me? How dare she take the things Harold had given me, the physical manifestations of our love story, the only pieces of him I had left? How dare she think she could get away with it? Think I was too old, too trusting, too stupid to figure out what she'd done? By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Vanessa directly. I wasn't going to cause a scene or rely on her conscience, because clearly she didn't have one. I wasn't going to give her a chance to lie, to manipulate, to turn this around on me. No, I was going to be smart about this. I was going to gather evidence, build a case, and then I was going to make sure she faced real consequences for what she'd done. I waited until 9 o'clock, a reasonable hour, and then I called Michael. I kept my voice calm, steady, even though inside I was still shaking with rage and grief. I told him I needed to see him alone, that it was important. He heard something in my voice, something that worried him, because he said he'd come right over. He'd be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 15, let himself in with his key, found me sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I hadn't drunk. My hands wrapped around the mug for warmth, even though it was a mild October morning. "Mom, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is it your health?" I looked at my son, my firstborn, the baby I'd brought home to this house 58 years ago, and I told him, "Michael, someone stole my jewelry, all of it. Every piece your father gave me over 53 years is gone." His face went white. "What? When? How?" "Last night, after you left. I went upstairs to get ready for bed and checked my jewelry box, and it was empty. Completely empty." He stood up, started pacing, running his hands through his hair the way he always did when he was stressed. "Did someone break in? Should we call the police?" "Michael," I said his name firmly, made him stop pacing and look at me. "Nothing else is missing. No broken windows, no forced doors. Just my jewelry, just the things that were in my bedroom." I watched understanding dawn on his face, watched him try to reject it, watched him struggle with what I was implying. "Mom, no, you can't think." Vanessa was upstairs last night, alone, in my bedroom, for 20 minutes. She's the only person besides me who's been near that jewelry box. "Mom, there has to be another explanation. Maybe you moved the jewelry somewhere. Maybe you forgot." The implication stung, even though I knew he didn't mean it the way it sounded. "Michael, I'm 80, not senile. I know what I know. Those pieces were in that box. I saw them 3 days ago, and now they're gone." Vanessa was the only person in my bedroom last night. He looked sick, his face pale and drawn, his hands shaking. "I'll talk to her. There has to be an explanation. Maybe she saw something. Maybe someone else was here, maybe." "Michael," I reached out and took his hand. "I'm not asking you to believe me over your wife. I'm asking you to talk to her and see what she says. Just talk to her. Ask her if she went into my bedroom, if she saw anything unusual, if she can explain what happened." He nodded, still looking shell-shocked, and promised to talk to Vanessa that day. As soon as he got home from work, he left looking like he'd aged 10 years in an hour, and I felt terrible for putting him in this position, for making him choose between his mother and his wife. But this had to be done. The truth had to come out. That evening, around 7 o'clock, Michael called me. His voice was tight, strained, carefully controlled in a way that told me he was barely holding himself together. "Mom, I talked to Vanessa. She swears she didn't take your jewelry. She said she never even went into your bedroom. Just used the hallway bathroom like you suggested. She's really upset that you would think she'd do something like that. She's crying, she's hurt. She says she's always tried so hard with you, and now you're accusing her of theft." I let the silence hang for a moment, processing this. Not surprised, but disappointed nonetheless. Of course she denied it. Of course she played the victim. Of course she was crying and hurt and offended. "Did you believe her?" I asked quietly. Another pause, longer this time. I want to believe her, Mom. She's my wife. I have to trust her. But do you believe her, Michael? In your gut, in your heart, do you believe her? He didn't answer, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. He wanted to believe her, but he didn't. Not really. Not completely. "I'm going to keep looking," I said. "Maybe I did move them. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll search the house again." I hung up, and then I got to work. Because I wasn't wrong, and I wasn't losing my mind, and I wasn't going to let Vanessa get away with this. Over the next several days, I became a woman on a mission. I went through my house methodically, not looking for the jewelry because I knew it wasn't there, but documenting everything else that was missing. I made lists, detailed inventories of every item I knew was gone. The silver picture frame, the antique brass clock, the crystal candlesticks, the set of gold-rimmed china plates, the vintage brooch, a set of silver serving pieces that had been my grandmother's, an antique mirror that had hung in the hallway, a collection of old coins that Harold had kept in his study. The list grew longer than I'd realized. She hadn't just taken the jewelry, she'd been systematically stealing from me for months, taking things she thought I wouldn't notice, things that could be sold for cash. I'd been so focused on the missing jewelry that I hadn't fully cataloged everything else that was gone. But now I did, writing it all down, noting when I'd last seen each item, where it had been kept. Then I did something that, even now, I'm quite proud of. I went online, pulled up Facebook on my computer, and joined several local online yard sale groups and estate sale groups. I'd never been much for social media, but I knew how to use a computer well enough. I'd taken a class at the senior center a few years back, learned the basics. I created a fake profile, used a photo of a generic older woman. I found online with a reverse image search to make sure it wasn't anyone local. Gave myself a different name, Margaret Peterson. Made up a fake birthday, a fake hometown, added a few generic interests, made the profile look real enough to pass a casual inspection. And then I started searching. I searched every online marketplace I could find. Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, eBay, Mercari, Poshmark, local buy and sell groups. I searched for jewelry, antiques, estate sales, vintage items. I spent hours every day scrolling through listings, looking at photos, checking descriptions. It took me a week, but I found it. There, in a listing on Facebook Marketplace from an account under the name V. Richardson Consignments, were photos of my jewelry. My jewelry, clear as day, no attempt to hide them or disguise them. The emerald pendant was there, photographed against a white background. The description reading vintage emerald necklace, excellent condition, genuine stone, $800 or best offer. The ruby ring, described as estate sale ruby and gold ring, authentic gemstone, $650s. The pearl necklace, classic pearl strand, cream-colored, $450. The sapphire earrings. The diamond bracelet, listed for $2,500. Not all the pieces were there. Some had already sold, showing in her completed listings section. The gold bracelet from our first anniversary, sold 2 weeks ago for $300. A golden garnet brooch I hadn't even realized was missing, sold a month ago. My hands shook so hard I could barely use the mouse. I felt hot and cold all at once, my vision narrowing to those photos on the screen. My jewelry, my precious irreplaceable jewelry, being sold online for a fraction of what it was worth, both monetarily and emotionally, and she wasn't even trying to hide it. V. Richardson, Vanessa Richardson, using her real name or close enough to it. The arrogance, the sheer audacity of it took my breath away. She thought I was too old, too trusting, too technologically illiterate to find these listings. She thought she could steal from me with impunity because who would I tell? Who would believe me? But I had her now. I had proof. I took screenshots of everything. Every listing, every photo, every description, every price. I documented the profile, the name, everything. I downloaded the photos to my computer, saved them in multiple locations, emailed them to myself just to be safe. Then I went further. I went to my filing cabinet, the old metal one in Harold's study where we'd kept important papers for 50 years, and I pulled out the documentation I had for each piece of jewelry. Harold had been meticulous about keeping receipts, about keeping paperwork for anything of value. I had receipts for almost every piece, some yellowed with age, some faded but still legible. I had certificates of authenticity for the stones. I had appraisals we'd gotten for insurance purposes. I had photos of me wearing the pieces at various events over the years. I even had the cards Harold had given me with the gifts. Every birthday card and anniversary card and Christmas card over 53 years, many of them mentioning the specific piece he'd given me. Happy anniversary, my love. May this pearl necklace remind you that every year with you is precious. Merry Christmas, Dot. I hope you love the sapphire earrings as much as I love you. Happy 50th anniversary to the love of my life. These diamonds are forever, just like my love for you. I gathered everything together, organized it carefully, created a comprehensive file documenting my ownership of each piece. I made copies of everything. I took the copies to the bank and put them in a safety deposit box. I took another set of copies to my attorney. Patricia Chen had handled Harold's and my estate planning about 10 years back, helped us set up our wills and our medical directives. She was in her 50s, smart and sharp and no nonsense, and I trusted her completely. I called her office and made an appointment, told her it was urgent. 2 days later, I sat in her office and laid out everything. The missing jewelry, the online listings, the documentation proving ownership, the whole story. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing grimmer as I talked. When I finished, she looked at me for a long moment. Dot, you realize this is a criminal matter. This isn't a civil case. This is theft, and given the value involved and the fact that it's a family member stealing from an elderly person, this could be prosecuted as elder abuse. I know, I said. That's why I came to you first. I wanted legal advice before I go to the police. I wanted to make sure I have everything documented properly. She reviewed all my paperwork, took copies for her files, and then gave me the advice I needed. You have an excellent case. Your documentation is thorough. The online listings prove possession of the stolen goods. The fact that she's using her own name, or close to it, shows a pattern of behavior. My advice is to file a police report immediately. Bring all this documentation. And Dot, you need to prepare yourself for the fact that this is going to have serious consequences for Vanessa, and that's going to affect Michael. I know, I said again, but she stole from me. She violated my home and my trust. She took the only pieces of Harold I had left. I can't just let that go. Patricia nodded. I wouldn't expect you to. You're doing the right thing. I left her office feeling validated, feeling strong, feeling like maybe, just maybe, justice was possible. That afternoon, I drove to the Cedar Falls Police Department. I parked in the visitor lot, walked in through the front doors, and approached the desk officer. I need to file a police report, I said. I've been the victim of theft. The desk officer, a young man who couldn't have been more than 25, directed me to wait and said someone would be with me shortly. I sat in the waiting area, my folder of documentation on my lap, and I waited. About 15 minutes later, a female police officer approached me. She was young too, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. Ma'am, I'm Officer Ramirez. I understand you want to file a theft report? I stood up, shook her hand, and said, Yes, my daughter-in-law stole my jewelry, and I have proof. Officer Ramirez led me to a small interview room and listened patiently as I told her the whole story. I showed her my documentation, showed her the online listings, explained the timeline of events. I watched her face change as I talked, from polite professional interest to genuine concern and then to something harder, something angry. Ma'am, she said when I finished, you're telling me your daughter-in-law systematically stole items from your home over a period of months, including jewelry given to you by your late husband, and is currently attempting to sell these items online under her own name? That's exactly what I'm telling you, officer. And I have proof of ownership for every single piece. She took down all the information, made copies of my documentation, took screenshots of the online listings. She was thorough and professional, and I could tell genuinely upset on my behalf. Mrs. Richardson, I want you to know that we take these cases very seriously. Elder financial abuse is a significant problem, and when it's perpetrated by a family member, it's particularly egregious. Based on what you've shown me, the combined value of these items easily exceeds $10,000, which makes this a felony theft charge. Additionally, because of your age and the family relationship, this could be prosecuted as elder abuse, which carries enhanced penalties. A felony, elder abuse. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. This wasn't just about getting my jewelry back anymore. This was about Vanessa facing real, serious consequences for what she'd done. This was about prison time, a criminal record. Her life fundamentally altered by her choices. For a moment I wavered. Did I really want to do this? Did I really want to put Michael through this? Did I really want to be responsible for sending someone to prison? But then I thought about Harold, about the love he'd put into each piece of jewelry, about the years of saving and sacrifice. I thought about coming home and finding that box empty. I thought about Vanessa's face, her fake smiles, her fake concern, all while she was stealing from me. I thought about her trying to make people think I was losing my mind to cover her crimes. What happens next? I asked, my voice steady. We'll investigate. We'll verify that the online listings are still active. We'll attempt to track any sales that have already occurred through payment records if we can get warrants. We'll bring your daughter-in-law in for questioning. With your documentation and the evidence from the online listings, we have a strong case. I'll assign this to a detective. He'll be in touch within 48 hours. I thanked her and left the police station feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power, control, justice. 2 days later, Detective Morrison called me. He was a man in his 50s with a gruff voice but a kind manner. He came to my house to get a complete statement, to see where the jewelry had been kept, to understand the full context of the theft. He asked detailed questions about when I'd last seen each piece, who had access to my home when I'd started noticing things missing. He photographed my empty jewelry box, took pictures of my bedroom, documented everything carefully. Mrs. Richardson, he said when we finished, I've been a detective for 23 years, and I've seen a lot of elder abuse cases. Financial exploitation by family members is, unfortunately, more common than most people realize. What makes your case different is how thoroughly you've documented everything. Most victims don't have the kind of proof you've assembled. You've done excellent work here. I was a nurse for 37 years, I told him. Documentation was part of the job. I know how to keep records. He smiled at that. Well, it's going to make my job a lot easier. Based on what I'm seeing, we have strong probable cause for arrest and search warrants. I'll get those this week. We'll search her residence, seize any stolen property we find, and bring her in for questioning. Will she go to jail? If we find the stolen property and she can't provide a legitimate explanation for how she came to possess your jewelry, yes, she'll be arrested. She'll be booked, arraigned, probably released on bail pending trial. The district attorney will decide what charges to file, but based on the value and the circumstances, I'd expect felony theft and elder abuse charges at minimum. I nodded, trying to process what that meant, what I'd set in motion. And my son? He didn't know anything about this. I don't want him to get in trouble. Unless we find evidence that he was involved or knew about the thefts, he won't be charged with anything. But Mrs. Richardson, I won't lie to you. This is going to be hard on him. Finding out your spouse is a thief, watching them get arrested, going through a criminal trial, that's not easy. I know, I said quietly, but she stole from me. She violated my home and my trust. What was I supposed to do? Exactly what you did, he said firmly. You protected yourself. You stood up for yourself. Don't feel guilty about that. Over the next week, I went about my normal routine while waiting to hear from Detective Morrison. I went to the grocery store, tended my garden, had lunch with some friends from my nursing days. But underneath the normalcy, I was wound tight, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the knock on the door or the phone call that would tell me they'd arrested Vanessa. Michael called several times, asking if I'd found the jewelry, if there was any news. I hated lying to him, but I couldn't tell him about the police investigation. Not yet, so I told him I was still looking, still trying to figure out what happened, which was technically true even if it wasn't the whole truth. Then, one Thursday morning, my phone rang at 8:30. It was Michael, but his voice was wrong, shaky and thin and scared. Mom, he said, and I could hear him crying. Mom, the police came to our house this morning. They had a search warrant. They searched our whole house, went through everything, and then they arrested Vanessa. My heart started pounding. What for? Theft. They said you filed a report, that she stole your jewelry and was trying to sell it online. Mom, why didn't you tell me you went to the police? I gripped the phone tighter. Because she's your wife, Michael, and I knew this would hurt you. But she stole from me. She came into my home, into my bedroom, and she took the only pieces of your father I had left. What did you expect me to do? He was crying harder now, his words coming in gasps. I know. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. The detective showed me the evidence. The photos of her online listings, your jewelry being sold for hundreds of dollars. I couldn't believe it, or maybe I didn't want to believe it, but it was all there, undeniable. Did they find any of the pieces? Yes, his voice broke. They found the diamond bracelet hidden in her closet in a shoebox. They found the gold bracelet in her car in the glove compartment. They found other things too. Things I didn't even know were missing from your house. Silver pieces, some plates, other jewelry. Mom, how long has she been doing this? Months, I said quietly. Maybe longer. I started noticing things missing almost 8 months ago. But I thought I was losing my memory. I thought I was going senile. Oh, Mom, he sounded destroyed. I'm so sorry. I should have believed you from the start. When you first told me the jewelry was missing, I should have trusted you instead of defending her. You loved her, I said. That's not a crime, honey. That's being human. They took her away in handcuffs, he said, his voice barely a whisper. My wife, in handcuffs, in front of the neighbors. Everyone saw. We talked for a while longer, Michael crying, me trying to comfort him while dealing with my own complicated feelings. Relief that justice was being served. Guilt for putting him through this. Anger at Vanessa for causing all this pain. Grief for the trust that had been broken, the family that had been fractured. Over the next several weeks, the full extent of Vanessa's theft and deception came to light. Detective Morrison was thorough, tracing her online sales, finding buyers, tracking down some of the stolen items. The silver picture frame had been sold for $40, the antique clock for $100, the crystal candlesticks for $75, the china plates for $200. She'd made thousands of dollars selling my belongings, my memories, my life, and she'd done it without a shred of remorse, pricing items to move quickly, probably spending the money as soon as she got it. But it got worse. During the investigation, Detective Morrison discovered that Vanessa had significant credit card debt that Michael didn't know about. Nearly $40,000 spread across 6 different credit cards, all in her name only, all secret. She'd been living well beyond their means for years, buying designer clothes and handbags worth thousands of dollars, getting expensive spa treatments and salon visits, eating at high-end restaurants with friends and charging it all while telling Michael she was being frugal and careful with money. The jewelry was supposed to solve her problem, Detective Morrison explained to me. She'd thought she could steal it piece by piece, sell it quietly, pay off her debts, and I just think I'd misplaced things or was losing my memory. She'd been counting on my age, on people's willingness to believe that an 80-year-old woman might be confused or forgetful, but she'd miscalculated. She'd underestimated me. She thought I was weak, confused, an easy mark. She'd been wrong. When I found out about the credit card debt, about her deliberate deception not just to me but to Michael, about her calculated plan to exploit my age to cover her crimes, the last shred of sympathy I might have had for her evaporated completely. This wasn't someone making a desperate mistake. This was someone who'd been lying and stealing and manipulating for years. Someone who'd looked me in the eye and called me Mom while plotting to rob me. Someone who'd been prepared to let everyone think I was senile to cover her crimes. Detective Morrison also discovered that Vanessa had been making sympathetic comments to Michael and to friends about my memory, my confusion, my declining mental state. She'd been laying groundwork, creating a narrative that I was becoming unreliable, so that when things went missing, when I noticed, no one would believe me. It was calculated. It was cruel. It was evil. Michael was devastated when he learned all of this. He'd known about some credit card debt, he told me, but thought it was maybe $5,000, something manageable. He'd had no idea about the designer shopping, the expensive lifestyle Vanessa had been living behind his back. He'd trusted her completely, never questioned where money was going, never checked the accounts. He filed for divorce the week after her arrest. There was no hesitation, no attempt at reconciliation. The betrayal was too deep, too complete. She'd lied to him about everything. stolen from his mother, violated his trust in ways that couldn't be repaired. The case moved forward. Vanessa's lawyer tried everything to get the charges reduced or dismissed. He argued that the jewelry had been a gift, that I'd given Vanessa permission to sell it. But my documentation proved otherwise. The receipts, the insurance papers, the photos of me wearing the pieces, the cards from Harold, all of it established clear ownership. Her lawyer tried to argue that Vanessa had found the items in the house and thought they were abandoned. But that didn't explain why she'd hidden some pieces in her closet and car. It didn't explain the months of systematic theft. It didn't explain the fake online profile, the attempt to sell everything quietly. He even tried to suggest that I was suffering from dementia, that I didn't accurately remember what had happened, that I was confused and misremembering events. But Patricia was ready for that. She presented medical records showing I'd had a full cognitive evaluation just 6 months ago and passed with flying colors. She presented my detailed, organized documentation, my methodical investigation, my clear and coherent testimony. No one who saw my case file, who heard me speak, who saw how thoroughly I'd prepared could possibly think I was confused or unreliable. The trial was set for the following spring, but as the court date approached, as the evidence mounted, as it became increasingly clear that Vanessa was going to be convicted, her lawyer recommended she take a plea deal. The district attorney offered her a deal: plead guilty to grand theft and elder financial abuse, accept a sentence of 3 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 18 months, and make full restitution for all stolen items that couldn't be recovered. If she rejected the deal and went to trial, if she was convicted, she'd face up to 10 years. Vanessa took the deal. She had no choice, really. The evidence was overwhelming. The sentencing hearing was in late April, almost 6 months after that Sunday dinner when she'd stolen my jewelry. I attended, sitting in the courtroom with Michael beside me. Stephen flew in from California to support his brother. Patricia sat with us, my advocate and my guide through this difficult process. Vanessa looked different than I'd ever seen her. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup. She wore a plain blue suit, her hair pulled back simply, her face pale and makeup-free. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Martinez, reviewed the case carefully before pronouncing sentence. She spoke directly to Vanessa, her voice hard. "Mrs. Richardson, you systematically stole from an elderly woman who trusted you, who welcomed you into her family, who gave you access to her home. You stole items of immense sentimental value, items that represented a lifetime of love and marriage. You attempted to profit from your theft, and you tried to cover your crimes by making others believe the victim was confused or losing her mental faculties. This court finds your actions particularly egregious because of the violation of trust involved. You didn't steal from a stranger. You stole from your husband's mother, from someone who should have been able to rely on you for care and support." I watched Vanessa's face as the judge spoke. She kept her eyes down, wouldn't meet anyone's gaze. I wondered if she felt any remorse at all, or if she was just sorry she'd been caught. Judge Martinez sentenced her to 3 years in prison as agreed in the plea deal. She also ordered restitution of $8,400 for items that had been sold and couldn't be recovered, plus court costs and fees. Vanessa would have to pay that money before she could be released from parole, whenever that might be. After the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse with Michael and Stephen. Michael looked exhausted, wrung out, years older than he had 6 months ago. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked. "I will be," I said honestly. "This has been hard, for all of us. But justice was served, and that matters." "I'm so sorry," he said for what felt like the 100th time. "Sorry you had to go through this. Sorry I brought her into our lives. Sorry I didn't believe you sooner." "Michael, stop apologizing. You fell in love with someone who turned out to be a liar and a thief. That's not your fault. You have a good heart, and someone took advantage of that. Don't let this make you cynical. Don't let her take that from you too." Stephen hugged me tight. "Mom, you're the strongest person I know. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." I hugged him back, grateful for my boys, for their love and support even through this awful situation. As for the jewelry, some pieces were recovered and returned to me. The diamond bracelet that the police had found in Vanessa's closet was returned within a few weeks of her arrest. I held it in my hands, this beautiful piece that Harold had given me on our 50th anniversary, and I cried. It was home. It was safe. The gold bracelet from our first anniversary was also recovered, found in Vanessa's car. I wear it often now, every day actually, touching it throughout the day, remembering Harold's smile when he gave it to me, so young and hopeful and in love. A few other pieces were tracked down through Detective Morrison's investigation. He found the buyer who'd purchased the pearl necklace and explained the situation. The buyer, a kind woman who'd bought the pearls as a gift for her mother, willingly returned them when she learned they were stolen. "I couldn't keep them knowing they were taken from you," she said. "Your husband's love is in those pearls. They belong with you. But some pieces are gone forever, sold to people who couldn't be traced, scattered to the four winds. The ruby ring from Stephen's graduation, the sapphire earrings from Michael's birth, the emerald pendant from Ireland. The thought that they're out there somewhere, being worn by people who don't know their stories. Their significance, it hurts, but I've made my peace with it. The memories those pieces represented, those are still mine. Vanessa couldn't steal those, no matter how hard she tried. I still remember the look on Stephen's face when he graduated college, the pride and joy and accomplishment. I still remember holding newborn Michael in the hospital, counting his tiny fingers and toes, marveling at the miracle of him. I still remember Ireland with Harold, driving through the green countryside, laughing at his terrible attempts at an Irish accent, feeling grateful for the life we'd built together. The jewelry was beautiful and precious, but the real treasure was always the love it represented, and that's mine forever. I learned a lot through this experience. I learned that being old doesn't mean being weak or foolish or an acceptable target for exploitation. I learned that documentation matters, that keeping good records isn't just about being organized, it's about protecting yourself and what's yours. I learned that trusting your gut when something feels wrong is important, even when you're being told you're imagining things or forgetting things or losing your mental sharpness. I learned that justice sometimes takes courage, that standing up for yourself might mean hurting people you love, but that doesn't make it wrong. I learned that you can be 80 years old and still fight back, still demand accountability, still refuse to be victimized. And I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect and trust and integrity. Vanessa was family by marriage, but she never acted like family. Real family doesn't steal from you. Real family doesn't exploit your trust. Real family doesn't try to make others think you're losing your mind to cover their crimes. Michael healed slowly from the betrayal. For several months after Vanessa's sentencing, he moved back home with me, staying in his old childhood bedroom while he sorted out his finances and his life. We spent a lot of evenings sitting on the back deck that Harold and I had built all those years ago, just talking. Sometimes about Vanessa and the betrayal, sometimes about Harold and happy memories, sometimes about nothing important at all, just enjoying each other's company. He apologized constantly at first, for bringing Vanessa into our lives, for not believing me sooner, for being fooled by her. Every time I told him the same thing: you loved someone, and that person betrayed you. That speaks to her character, not yours. Don't let this make you bitter or cynical. Don't let her take away your ability to love and trust. That's letting her win. Gradually, Michael started to heal. He went to therapy to work through the betrayal, and the guilt and the complicated feelings of grief for a relationship that had been built on lies. He moved into his own apartment after a few months, a modest place he could afford without strain. He became more careful in his next relationship, more cautious about trust, but he didn't close himself off completely. I was proud of him for that, for choosing to stay open to love even after being so badly hurt. Vanessa served 20 months of her 3-year sentence before being released on parole. I heard through the grapevine that she moved to another state, maybe Arizona or New Mexico, changed her name legally, started over somewhere new. I hope she learned something from all of this, that prison changed her, that she became a better person. But honestly, I doubt it. People like Vanessa, people who can look you in the eye and lie while stealing from you, they don't usually fundamentally change. They just get better at hiding what they are. But that's not my problem anymore. She's out of my life, out of Michael's life, and that's all that matters. I still live in my house here in Cedar Falls, the same house Harold and I bought in 1968, the same house where we raised our boys and built our life. I still tend the garden we planted together, still sit on the deck we built with our own hands, still sleep in the bedroom we shared for over 50 years. The oak trees we planted are huge now, providing shade in summer, turning brilliant gold in fall, standing bare and proud in winter. The jewelry box sits on my dresser in the same spot it's occupied for 50 years. It holds fewer pieces now, but each one I have is precious, protected, treasured. The diamond bracelet, the gold bracelet I wear every day, the pearl necklace, each one a reminder of Harold's love, of our life together, of the fact that I fought for what was mine and won. I had a security system installed after all of this. Cameras at every entrance, monitored professionally. Alerts sent to my phone and Michael's if any door or window opens unexpectedly. I had a safe installed in my closet, bolted to the floor where I keep the jewelry now. Maybe that makes me paranoid, but I call it being smart. I call it learning from experience. I call it making sure no one ever takes advantage of me again. Michael has started dating someone new slowly and carefully. Her name is Claire, and she's a kindergarten teacher at the elementary school where Michael's company supplies materials. She's kind and genuine, and most importantly, interested in our family history. She asks questions about Harold, about our life together, about the photos on my walls. She's helped me in the kitchen, brings a dish to Sunday dinners, stays to help clean up, and seems to genuinely enjoy being part of our family. I like her, and I'm cautiously optimistic. But I also watch carefully. I pay attention. I protect what's mine and what's Michael's, because that's what you do. When you've learned the hard lessons of life, you stay vigilant. You trust, but you verify. You love, but you protect yourself too. People sometimes ask me if I regret reporting Vanessa to the police, if I feel bad that she went to prison, if I wish I'd handled it differently. The answer is no. Not for a second. Not even for a moment. She stole from me, yes, but more than that, she violated my trust. My home, my memories. She tried to make me seem like a confused old woman to cover her crimes. She exploited my age, my willingness to trust family, my grief over losing Harold. She hurt my son, betrayed his love and trust, left him with debt and humiliation and years of healing ahead of him. Those actions have consequences. In a just world, people who do harm face consequences for their choices. Vanessa earned every single day she spent in that prison cell. Every moment of discomfort, every hour of regret. I didn't send her to prison. Her own choices did that. I just made sure she was held accountable. I'm 80 years old now, and I've lived through more than most people can imagine. I've seen war and peace, prosperity and recession, joy and heartbreak. I've watched the world change in ways both wonderful and terrible. I've lost people I loved, including the love of my life, and I've kept going. I've raised 2 sons, worked a demanding career for nearly 4 decades, built a life I'm proud of, and I'll be damned if I was going to let some entitled, greedy, manipulative woman take what was mine without facing consequences. So yes, I reported every piece as stolen. I documented everything, built a case, worked with the police, testified in court, and watched her be led away in handcuffs. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. You know what Harold used to say? He said I was tougher than I looked, that underneath my quiet exterior was a spine of steel, that I was the strongest person he'd ever known. For most of our marriage, I thought he was exaggerating, seeing me through the lens of love that made me seem better than I was. But sitting here now, touching the gold bracelet on my wrist, remembering everything I've been through and how I handled it, I think maybe he was right. Maybe I am strong. Maybe strength isn't about never being hurt or never being vulnerable. Maybe it's about standing up for yourself when you are hurt, about fighting back when someone tries to take advantage of your vulnerability, about demanding justice even when it's hard. I hope my story helps someone. I hope if there's someone out there being exploited by a family member, being told they're confused or forgetful, being taken advantage of because of their age, they hear this and know they're not alone. They're not helpless. They can fight back. They can demand justice. Age doesn't make you powerless. It makes you experienced, and that's a different kind of power. So where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you love your grandma, if you appreciate the strong women in your life who've weathered storms you can't even imagine, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories. Because believe me, when you live 80 years, you collect quite a few tales. Some are happy, some are sad, and some, like this one, are about standing up for yourself and refusing to be a victim. And share this with your friends, especially if they have grandparents or elderly loved ones who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself. That being old doesn't mean being powerless. That justice is worth fighting for no matter how many candles are on your birthday cake. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go call your grandma, or your mother, or whatever older woman in your life has shaped who you are. Tell her you love her. Tell her you appreciate her. Tell her about some YouTube video you watched about an 80-year-old woman who fought back and won. And trust me, she'll love hearing from you. Because at the end of the day, after all the years and all the experiences and all the battles won and lost, what matters most is connection, love, family, the real kind, the kind built on respect and trust and integrity, not just blood. That's what Harold taught me over 53 years of marriage. That's what those pieces of jewelry represented. And that's what Vanessa tried to steal but never could. Because some things can't be taken, only given. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, don't mess with Grandma. We're tougher than we look.